Oh boy. Man, forget about Infinity War Part 2 next year because it won't be beat by Best Friends Volume 2. Yeah, I got to go to another Fathom Events screening tonight. This was Volume 2 of the Greg Sestero, Tommy Wiseau reunion project, Best Friends. A lot of the supplemental material that they would typically have at a Fathom Events screening appeared before the feature. Man, did this supplemental material kind of hype me up for a movie that didn't quite live up to the oddity that was a music video starring Tommy Wiseau fighting a diner waitress who has predator vision with a laser gun and with like 80s reject kids in the background like waiting at a table. That was kind of special. And then there was this feature from, I guess, TMZ Live or something where they interviewed Greg and Tommy via a very shitty webcam connection talking about the movie. I guess that was kind of a primer for anyone who missed Part 1 to kind of get caught up a little bit on what to expect in Part 2. Actually, during the screening, I was sitting next to some people who hadn't seen Volume 1, and they were kind of asking me before the screening of like, you think they're gonna do like a previously or, you know, kind of give you a little bit of a catch up? I'm like, probably not. They'll probably just go right into stuff. I have a lot of mixed feelings on Volume 2. If you're still a Sestero and Wiseau fan, you're gonna go see this movie or catch up with this movie at some point regardless. If I had to choose between Volume 1 or Volume 2, this is hard because Volume 1 has more of what you would expect from a Sestero Wiseau reunion project. It has more of the weirdness. It has more of the outlandish stuff. It's a little bit more crazy with its performances and plot than it is in Part 2. Probably because Tommy is in Volume 1 a hell of a lot more, and I can't remember if I got into kind of the spoilers of the plot for my review for that, but there's a good reason why he's only peppered throughout Volume 2. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it all has good payoff with regards to the plot. That's kind of the bottom line with Volume 2 of Best Friends, is it's not quite as outlandish as the first installment. It's not quite as crazy or as hokey at times as the first installment could get. But from a filmmaking standpoint, they do some really interesting things. And I can't believe I'm saying that about a Tommy Wiseau movie. It's weird because you want to go into something with Tommy Wiseau in it and expect maybe you just have that inherent expectation that it's going to be just as off the wall crazy or off the wall insane in its delivery as The Room was. And I think I mentioned this in the previous review as well, but Tommy's only in this in acting capacity. He's not a producer, he's not the creative force behind the movie. This is Greg's script, and someone else is doing the directing. Again, they love those drone shots, so you get plenty of those in here. I have to give it to Greg that this second installment has a tighter script than the first one. Now, it's not up to par with some of the greats like the Coen brothers or a Tarantino script, but you can definitely tell that he's trying for that. He's trying for that aesthetic with this crime story out in the desert that at times I was like, okay, this is his No Country for Old Men moment, sure. Characterization, while not the most stellar characterization I've ever seen or anything like that, these characters are written very well, I should say. Very well for what they need to be. They're utilized very efficiently. They get some pretty decent character actors, small-time talent from the looks of things, but they get some actors into these supporting roles in this new installment that really do kind of capture a lot of the magic on the screen, which is good because, as I mentioned in my previous review for Volume 1, one of the minor detriments to this movie, because I don't want to bag on Sestero too much because he's written a pretty good, well-rounded utilitarian script here, is that I don't know if, again, I can't tell if he's doing this on purposefully or if this is just as much acting as he can exude given the material, he is not the most attention-grabbing part of the movie, and that's kind of a detriment because a lot of the scenes and a lot of the interactions revolve around him and another actor sometimes, or a couple of actors in the same scene, and kind of deferring to him as the lead of this production. And I don't know, he just doesn't scream leading man in a lot of his performance here. He's very subdued, very muted. Again, I can't tell if that's just as much as he can give you, or if that really is him kind of feeding into the meme of just flat affect Mark. He is oftentimes overshadowed by a lot of the supporting cast in this. His girlfriend, the character's name is Tracy, I believe, she definitely invests a lot more into kind of the duplicitous nature of her character in this movie. There's a point where they meet up with her Uncle Rick, who you know from the get-go isn't her uncle. He's this character actor who has this backstory about being a football star he got his ACL torn and his career just ended there in college, and he's just this shady, scuzzy type of guy that you know things are going to turn south immediately with this dude, but he's got this whole cowboy mentality, like Mark. I almost called him Mark. Sorry, Greg. Greg Sestero's character, John, goes so far as to even say, like, why is he acting like Clint Eastwood? Or, you didn't tell me your uncle was Clint Eastwood. They bring in this locksmith at a certain point called the Doc, who looks like Jerry Garcia and Tommy Chong had a kid. There's a point I was just kind of laughing to myself a little bit. Just, it's an interesting character quirk where it felt like something trying to emulate a Tarantino line where he's like, I'm not going to do any work until I get a nice tall glass of that single malt whiskey on the rocks. And we're going to sit here nice and calmly until I finish my whiskey, and then we'll get to work. Man, Greg must have been watching some Tarantino movies or something at that point, because that dialogue just screams emulating something in that style. That's kind of the give and take with Volume 2. There are genuinely cinematic moments in this movie. There are points where you'll have Greg and his girlfriend out in the Arizona desert at night, and it's lit really well to kind of give that ominous feel. There's a point where a cop car pulls up behind their van, and they're just stopped there on this dusty old road, and you feel a sense of tension in kind of the stillness with just the crickets in the background and this slow swell of Trent Reznory type music underneath. It produces some pretty effective ambiance at times in this movie. It's all give and take, because sometimes there'll be a shot that's a little too out of focus, or there's a shot that continuity-wise just immediately fucks with your brain a little bit, or again, Sestero will deliver on a line that is a little too muted given the circumstances. Like, his emoting is not the best. And I couldn't believe I was watching this movie being like, this is way too normal. Part of me was interested, but also kind of frustrated that I'm like, where's the crazy Tommy Wiseau stuff? When's that gonna happen in this movie? Even then, it gets really surreal and dream sequences and things like that. And those dream sequences and their surreal nature are really effective. Tommy Wiseau, I keep coming back to my previous review, but a lot of it stays consistent into Volume 2. Tommy Wiseau actually is inhabiting a character here. It's a pretty subdued character given where we saw him, in the room. Part of me is like, good on you, Tommy. You're able to do something with a fairly interesting character here. And then part of me is like, oh man, I was really hoping for something so bad it's good here. There's some stuff. There's just some odd things laced throughout the movie that do kind of get you into that this is ridiculous territory. Tommy, for a good portion of the movie, is running around in a Kevlar vest and the helmet for the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail from the looks of things. There's a point at the end of the movie where it's just Greg Sestero, Paul Schreer, and Tommy Wiseau standing in front of a house, and Paul Scheer's just got his arms around both of them, and they're just looking up at this house, and they're just laughing. And then there's a point, I think, just Greg Sestero just broke character and just starts laughing. It's the first time I saw him, like, emote a lot, which means probably that he just broke character, and Tommy's just messing with him. He's like, yeah, John, you're laughing now. And that made me chuckle a lot. There's some genuinely funny lines in this movie. The supporting character, Uncle Rick, at one point, he doesn't trust the locksmith, Doc, and while he's pouring him his whiskey into a glass, he just looks over, tells Greg, like, man, I should be stirring this with my dick for that asshole, or something like, just something bizarre and weird and vulgar he'll say, and it works. Given what's been established about this very shady character, that works, sure. From the filmmaking standpoint, aside from just a couple of continuity things here and there, this is a pretty film, honestly. It's a really well-constructed film. And the script, again, it's not the most mind-blowingly awesome script, but for what it needs to be about this little crime drama story, it works. It's efficient. And serviceable in that sense. It honestly had kind of a sweet moment at the end when it's revealed what everyone's kind of been gearing towards with this MacGuffin of this safe. When the safe is finally opened, I wasn't anticipating what was going to be in the safe, but even then I kind of saw what was in the safe and I'm like, aww, and it got a little sentimental moment out of me. I was like, that is kind of sweet, I guess. Really, it let down what I was anticipating it to be, because after Volume 1, I was like, okay, Volume 2 is where shit's gonna go off the walls crazy. They were promising these just freakish fever dream sequences, Tommy Wiseau running around in a blonde wig yelling, covered in blood, and that, I mean, that's there in the movie, but it's only there minimally, and you're kind of taken aback at how very reserved, but how well it can stay reserved this movie can be. It's a puzzle to me. And part of me is like, I really should watch this whole 3.5 hour to 4 hour experience. And that's why, if I do find myself in possession of a Best Friends Blu-ray, Greg or Tommy, please, I want to be able to go back and watch this, because it's not quite to the levels of The Room. It certainly isn't. As a combined movie overall, this is a far more competent movie, but I feel if you're going into it to anticipate that you're going to be hooting and hollering and laughing your ass off at every inconsistent or every crazy thing that they could put to screen, you're going to be kind of disappointed. This movie at no point goes off the rails like The Room does. It maintains focus for what it needs to maintain focus for astonishingly well. That'll either make it a very hum and drum sit for you, or you will kind of be a little amazed and a little proud of the fact that Greg and Tommy pulled this off. That actually this is a film that works as a film. I don't really know what much else I can say other than, please, again, Tommy, Greg, Blu-ray, soon. I want to be able to show friends this who are kind of into sort of art house type films, or films that get a little surreal and off kilter at times, whether it's intentional or not. Because I don't think this is a so bad it's good movie. It definitely gets crazy and weird, but that's the intent, I feel, at times. And the intent's there in the characterizations, in the bizarre scenes and sequences, in the performance of Tommy Wiseau. This isn't him being fully incompetent and just kind of being crazy for crazy's sake. This is him actually doing something with a character. I couldn't be happier to see that, even though part of me is a little let down because we expect such memeable or infamous type of delivery from a Tommy Wiseau. If you are a Sestero or Wiseau fan, you, like I said, you'll have a mixture of emotions. You'll half be disappointed that they don't just go for the full room, but at the same time you'll kind of be like, yeah, good job guys, you did it. So bye everybody.